All right, self-control. So, and its implications. The basic idea, the overall concept here, the thesis, is that, or hypothesis, is that self-control is indicative of being in a situation which is better to change than to keep. The basic concept of this is that self-control implies that you are somewhere where you aren't exactly free, where you are in danger. And to a large degree, actually, I should say that too much self-control is, and always the word too much, but like a great deal of self-control. Um, to some degree, self-control is fun. It's invigorating, to have to work your way around and manipulate and use your mind to make it through. It's like a chess game. You don't just go into a chess game and intuitively do it. You have to have some self-control. You have to, and it's fun. It's invigorating. But nevertheless, too much of it, and specifically having it all the time, is indicative of basically us being in a situation that we aren't evolved for, where for whatever reason we can't just follow our instincts and make it through too well. Um, the big common things that people have to have self-control over are sadness, anger, and arousal. You can't just be horny in public, you can't be angry in public, you can't be sad in public. And at least for sadness and anger, these lead to more sadness and anger, which is kind of just a crappy little, offshoot topic, but it is kind of lame that you can't be sad in public. In fact, it's kind of depressing. And it's pretty infuriating that you can't just be angry, because why not, like, if that's what you need to express. Anyways, if you can't just express yourself and you constantly have to be in control, it sort of takes something away from life, which is, in my mind, that self-control is when your brain or your head or your problem solver, I like to think of it, takes over for your instincts. It's sort of like a situation in which you know better than to just do exactly what you feel like or to be direct, and that you kind of have to manipulate in order to get what you want. And that's it's not my favorite situation to be in all the time. Sometimes it is fun, but it's not always fun to be in. And I think it's basically just a part of fear. As an interesting little offshoot for this, at least I think it's interesting, I think there's a difference between, like, older, younger, and male, female in how they feel this self-control. Because obviously kids are, not quite as self-control-y as adults, and I think to a large degree, and I don't want to make this offensive, I should put it this way: I think men, because of how we evolved, we were in much more deadly situations a lot of the times, like out hunting and going to war and things like that, and fighting each other, a lot of that. What that means is that fear, if testosterone and fear were linked, that would probably be beneficial to a large degree, to have that motivation to not just go with what you feel, but to instead have to be like kind of afraid of your own actions. So I think, there is something interesting in that, there may actually be a link between fear and self-control, because that's how I feel, at least, is that, like, when I really use self-control is when I'm afraid to just do what I feel like doing, and I can't just, maybe I feel like just curling up on someone, like, oh man, I just want to lay in that person's lap, but you can't. That would be weird. You can't just do that. So you have to sit there and think about it. That was an ugly face. Man, someone take that, right? Where was I going? The point is that I think self-control is indicative of being in a situation that one is not exactly evolved to just live in. Like, in, prehistoric times, I imagine that when people were out and about, at least hunting tribes, whatever, I imagine there was a lot more self-control there. Actually, take that back. I'm going to step back on that one. Um, but I do believe that like at home we there was less self control than other places. So what's the point? Well, the point is that if there's a lot of self control in the situation you're in, or too little, these are both problematic. If there's too much self control, then basically you never really get to feel free, and that's kind of lame. I think that like self control should be something we try or we strive to not completely and totally necessitate all the time in life, or at least much less. Um, Specifically for the emotions of sadness and anger and arousal and whatever else emotions there are that you're not really supposed to express. On the other hand, it can go too far the other way, where if there is no self-control over certain emotions, it leads to sort of a over emotional thinking. And there's a really healthy and difficult and complex interplay. Actually, no interplay, just balance or puzzle. That's a better word. Between emotions and how you deal with them. Like you can't ignore them. You can't say that they're unimportant because they're the driving force. But at the same time, they're sort of prehistoric. They're kind of outdated. They evolve very slow as compared to technology or culture. So to just follow them would lead to bad situations, which is why, for the most part, we don't just do that. Um, Man, I'm tripping myself out right now. You can't just follow your emotions, obviously. Everyone knows this. But you can't ignore them. So there's kind of like this balance, this figuring it out. And if we were to, and I think we definitely should more than we already have already, make it so the emotions you're supposed to control were less controlled, and the ones that you aren't really supposed to control were more controlled. Specifically, I think happiness is too free for the most part. Like if you're happy, just express it, like for the most part, and screw what mistakes you make. Like a lot of people go out making mistakes because they're happy, and that's too much of an emotion. It's too blind, at least for this situation. Although it would be nice to be able to just express happiness without having any problems. Similarly, sadness and all that are too controlled, where you can't just express them, and so they end up bottled up and creating these issues. And it's difficult. Like, where's the best place? I mean, like to some degree, it would be nice if we could like play God over ourselves, which technically we could do if we gathered enough intelligence. We could restructure our DNA, take out all the excess stuff that's not really useful, and make sure it all works perfectly. We could do that. That's possible. Not easy. I don't expect it. In the very least, we could evolve ourselves to be more situationally correct for the future, or at least have some drug type of thing that would help us to have our emotions in a certain range, you know, that's appropriate, along with making the situation fit them well. But the point is that if we became too comfortable with our emotions, even if we made the situation perfect so that our emotions fit it perfectly, we would be missing that adaptation. And adaptation, I think, is strongly in the head, that it has very, very much to do with self-control. Excuse me. And that would be a huge loss. Even if for 1,000 years, it worked out perfectly, it would still be just so bad the second that we needed to adapt to anything. So it can't be just pure emotion. We can't make it so we are, happy just with whatever we're doing all the time. But at the same time, we can't constantly be controlling ourselves, and it's an issue. But whatever it is, I think the level of self-control that's required, at least for certain emotions and thoughts and ideals and things like that, is obnoxious and painful. And I feel like when your mind takes over too much, your spirit misses out. You know, like it's kind of sad. It's kind of lonely. Because in your mind, it's just you. And it's only when, you know, you go out into your body that you get to be part of the superorganism for real. Or when you go into your body that you get to feel, I think, the truer forms of happiness to a degree. I don't think you can have one without the other at all. I think that just a whole bunch of drugs and amazing sex and, I don't know, power would feel great, assumably. This is like the devil argument. But it wouldn't think great, you know? Like, it may feel amazing, but I think there's actually something that's better than feeling. And I guess this is not really the subject I was going for, but one of the happiest moments in my life, I felt nothing. And it's not because I felt nothing. I've had happier feeling moments, but it's because within that moment, there was an understanding that this thing was so very good. And it was when one of my friends who had disappeared, saying they were going to kill themselves, showed up. And I didn't feel anything, but I knew it was the happiest moment of my life. And I still think that, even if I don't feel anything about it, which is weird. Similarly, the saddest moment of my life was when I heard some awful news, and I was completely numb to it. I mean, it wasn't like, I've definitely felt more depressed. So there's definitely something to say about that, which is that it can't just be one or the other. There's a balance. And I guess, yeah, I've got time. I'd like to close up with a little bit of the argument between essentially all self-control and no self-control, and how both of them seem rather unfulfilling to me. On the no self-control end, let's go for a devil argument. There is no such thing as the devil, obviously, because if there was, then, you know, like, there would only be one in the whole universe, right? No. It's a big universe, so there's multiple in the universe. Well, what happens if they meet? I mean, like, it doesn't make sense. There could be someone really powerful and cruel, though, and they could call themselves the devil, and I imagine if anyone ever gets the chance, they will. Kind of like that crazy guy calling himself Jesus. But the argument on the devil side is that with enough money and power and whatever, you don't have to have any self-control. And that is better than having to have a bunch of self-control. And yes, better than having to have it. But not having it at the same time is unadaptive. And I mean, even if you have all the money to change your environment, it leaves you stuck in one environment. Devil never gets to go on vacation, you know? Meanwhile, the like kind of Buddhist monk view, which is, I don't know, pretty. Let's see, yeah, I've got 1 minute, hurry up. Is the sort of have tons of self-control, or a Tibetan monk, I guess. And that's, you know, amazing. And in their minds, they go all sorts of places. They change their environment constantly in their minds and have, you know, wide expanses of living. But at the same time, they're significantly more conquerable and sort of, you know, uninspiring to look at. You know, their story is not super interesting, and for the most part, they can't express their mind, which is the big issue. I mean, because, like, if they could express what they were seeing and thinking and feeling, then it would be like, of course that, but, like, you can't express it. And so you can just ignore it and enjoy being crazy evil. Point is, self-control, it's something to not have too much of and not have too little of, to try and create a situation in which you are balanced between the two. And it's indicative, at least in this situation, of being in a culture that doesn't really let us be free. Thanks for watching.